So there was a large crowd following Jesus, about 5,000 men and all the others. And Jesus noticed them following him. He looked up and he thought to himself, they must be hungry. Now, it's important that we recognize here there's nothing to suggest that they were starving, right? Or they were poor, or they were helpless, they were destitute. Nothing to suggest that. Jesus looked up and he thought, oh, they've been following me, they must be hungry, right? And so he takes it upon himself to feed them. And not only did he feed them, but it goes on to say that they had as much as they wanted. There was so much so that there was leftovers. And the people were amazed, understandably. They were struck by this miracle, 5 loaves, and now enough for leftovers for 5,000 plus people. They saw the sign, right? They noticed the sign. And John makes it very clear that they noticed the sign. That's important in John's gospel, the sign, that Jesus gives them signs. But it seems like they got so caught up in the sign that there was something special about this Jesus. They saw the sign, but they didn't seem to realise what was underneath the sign, the real message in this miracle. And that is that Jesus was reflecting to them the truth of who God really was. So sometimes we can get so caught up in the miracles, can't we, and the great feats of Jesus that we don't recognise what Jesus is really trying to communicate to us. And that is that he is the true embodiment of God. That what we see in him is reflective of who God really is. That this is God's heart, that he looks up and he notices our slight hunger, even if we're not desperate. He notices and takes it upon himself to meet that need, to meet that hunger. And not only that, but he gives us as much as we want, as much as we really need, with leftovers. Now, is this the God that you think about when you come to prayer? Or do you perhaps come to prayer thinking, it's not always consciously thinking, but, sort of deeper down, thinking, oh, right, I've got to twist God's arm this morning. I've got to convince him to give, to help me with this, and then I'm going to have to repay him. Yeah. Is your image of God a God who's a little bit perhaps distant and not really particularly concerned with your needs? Or do you come to prayer with this kind of image of God, a God who is like always on the lookout for our need and wants to give us everything we need and more? What we think about God really matters. If we see God as stingy, as harsh, as disinterested, then that's the faith that we bring to God. We bring stingy faith. And stingy faith puts all kinds of barriers between us and God that God has to sort of try and get around. But if we think of God who is lavishly generous and kind and thoughtful, and then we bring that faith to God. And when we bring that kind of faith, as we see time and time in the Gospels, God can do extraordinary things, regardless of who we are.